Welcome to episode 17. Today's guest is Gabrielle Poli. The first time I saw one of Gabrielle's reels on Instagram documenting her tide pooling experiences, I felt a wave of shimmering beauty and awe that inspired me to check out more of her posts. I tend to be mesmerized by most, if not all, tide pooling accounts I come across on social media, and felt immediately drawn to the ways Gabrielle shares her tide pooling experiences through vibrant poetic visuals, connecting words of affirmation to the creatures and shells living in the tide pools, to her reflections on slowing down, taking time to notice, and practicing presence in/with the intertidal world and the ocean, and just in general. I've been obsessed with tide pooling for a while, and I guess obsessed with tide pooling in California more specifically, because I have been tide pooling in Staten Island before. And so it's on my bucket list to go tide pooling along the West Coast, which I have not done before. I love how Gabrielle connects tide pooling with mindfulness. On her page, she has posted about daydreaming about with the ocean, the art of noticing, like I mentioned before, her field notes from the heart, the mental health benefits of tide pooling, lessons and gifts from the intertidal, and more. When I'm not physically in or near the ocean, I look for lifelines to stay connected to the ocean. And in an unexpected way, I found Gabrielle's Instagram account, which I encourage you to check out. There is an online world of people who are sharing their tide pooling experiences, and it's freaking magical. If you ever have a chance to go tide pooling, I highly recommend it. Here is Gabrielle's bio. Gabrielle Poli is a heart-led naturalist, tide pooling along the rocky shores of Central California. With a background in human ecology, experiential education, and a few semesters of divinity school, she loves exploring the intersection of marine ecology and mindfulness. She finds the tide pools to be a place of inspiration, where she feels closest to the earth and to wonder. When Gabrielle is not tide pooling, she is likely teaching yoga, exploring a new nature spot, reading Mary Oliver, or watching the sea lions. Tide pooling is her favorite mindfulness practice. It helps her to slow down and focus on the good. Tide Pool Daydreams is a space where she shares her reflections from the intertidal, weaving together mindfulness, ocean appreciation, and creativity. She believes ocean conservation begins with connection. For what we connect to, we love, and what we love, we care for. A reflection from this episode. Retraining her brain to see more of the good in the world. At some point during the episode, Gabrielle talks about retraining her brain to see more of the good in the world, and this feels, at least for me, necessary to do for my own mental health and just to have a greater picture of what's going on, of existence, if that makes sense. I really love how Gabrielle says the words retraining her brain, because I think it's one thing to change my mindset or cultivate a different mindset, and another related thing to change the actual physical neural pathways and networks in my mind that work a particular way because of me thinking or doing something repeatedly. Does that make sense? For example, every morning a person wakes up and turns on the news, and within 15 minutes, they know about 2 murders, a car accident, drama at the local ice cream shop, the murder mystery across the country, the plane crash that happened in another country, another impending war, and then 2 minutes are given to share about the Good Samaritans who helped a horse in trouble. Doing that every day, it can not only shape how how a person's mind views and understands the world, but their actual brain is being shaped by the pattern of every single day they get up, turn on the news, and absorb all that negative information. So when Gabrielle said she's retraining her brain to see more of the good, I was like, I want to do this too. So I've started looking for the good in my personal life and the outer world, in the tiniest of ways. And I notice in myself a sense of release. I notice that where I felt lack, there actually is none. You know, I think noticing more of the good really opens up my sense of abundance, but not that it's just like I'm sensing abundance, but that it's, there's actual abundance there. Um, I don't know. I felt a sort of a lightness when I start looking for more of the good. Um, I've felt like sensations when I start noticing the good. I can't really describe it, but um, something is going on. So I am looking for more of the good in my life, and people can use whatever word they want to use that feels best. If you don't like the word good, you can use a different word. And yeah, I think I have seen different Instagram accounts where people share good news, and I think all of us, we could use even more good news. There could be news channels just dedicated to um, you know, good news. Wait, someone has messaged me. Um, yeah, just like I feel like there's no shortage of good news out there. No shortage of or yeah, there's we could just use more of that. Um so I got kind of thrown off by that Instagram message. Because I'm reading from my phone. Hashtag real life. So, where was I? And before we pressed record, Gabrielle was telling me that she listened to the episode with Michaela Harrison, who talks about whale medicine, ancestral guidance, and interspecies relationship building. And I'm not sure if I told Gabrielle this, but I participated in Michaela's first submersion cohort, which is magical, magical, magic. And some of us in the cohort checked in recently. And I remember Michaela saying something like, it's not all doom and gloom out there. And even though all this terrible stuff is going on, there's more going on than the terrible stuff, you know? And just thinking about, you know, the wonder the wonder that Gabrielle encounters on her tide pulling adventures just makes me think how, awe and wonder is still very much alive and well in the world. I'm not going to say exactly what Michaela said, but she was just saying, like, if I had to translate what she said through like my own understanding, I think it's sort of is like watching the news where if every day you watch the terrible news and if that's all you're exposed to about the world, then a person could think that's all that there is to the world. And then it's like you dwell in this tunnel vision of all these terrible, horrific things going on. And it's almost like something's being stolen from you because meanwhile, there's a whole multiverse out there where there's all these magical creatures, humans included. Um, and that just it's like something is being stolen from you, and I just got this image now of like kind of deteriorating in this tunnel vision of what's wrong and what's going on. Um, and this isn't to say that you avoid what's happening in the world. You just act like it's not happening. This is to, I think, what both the connection I'm trying to make between Gabrielle and Michaela, what they're both sharing is like there's a lot there's we have to see like the bigger picture, you know? Um and it's okay. It's okay to see this bigger picture, this bigger, more complex picture where all these terrible things are going on, and then there are these colorful, vibrant, beautiful tide pools to go and find calm and presence in. There's the forest to take a walk in and to commune with the trees. There's the ocean to go surf in and be one with the earth and God and laughing with your friends on the couch. It's just there's so much more going on to there's so much happening out there that's beautiful and feels good. And maybe it's a part of the bigger agenda to have people dwelling in these silos of all the terrible negative things going on. And people do talk about that um just kind of sucking out all of your energy and your hope and your desire, your interest in life, just sucking out everything, and your sense of this and your sense of that, um, just draining your yeah, draining your imagination, draining just just you know and then if and then I'm sorry I have to say it, and then if you are a person who wants to have that bigger perspective where it's like, I know that all of these things are going on, um but there's also like this pastry shop. I would love to go to this pastry shop and eat this delicious pastry with my friend, or make this delicious cake with my friend, or just sit on the porch with my dog. Like, I feel like sometimes people will come after you and say, you're not getting your energy sucked dry. You're not living in tunnel vision and siloing yourself in this one way of seeing the world and understanding the world. And it's not fair. But the astonishing thing is that there literally is a multiverse, right? And I'm going off script right now. Um um and that it's like we have to be mindful of like or maybe I should speak from the I want to be mindful of disconnecting myself from all the beauty, magic, love, all the things, in some attempt to like prove that I care or that I'm paying attention. Um, I really love how Gabrielle talks about how she finds calm and presence in the tide pools while yeah, when she goes tide pooling. And I just feel like this is such a beautiful example of you know having connecting to connecting to other parts of life. I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense, but I am feeling called to say go outside. Because in the episode, we talk about getting out of our minds and getting into our bodies. And I feel one way to do that is to go outside. Maybe you sit outside or you take a walk outside and you listen to the birds. You feel the sun on your face. Um, Maybe you notice a plant. You notice the details of a plant. You just see people watch in the neighborhood. Just kind of um, what am I trying to say? Just kind of connecting to the bigger picture, you know, or basically I could go back to what I was talking about, finding the good in life, seeking out um what feels good to you, what what is good to you, or people use different words, what feels positive. um so yeah, I yeah, I feel like that's such a great remind. This is all of this that I just shared. Um, you know, that nexus of what Gabrielle and Michaela are saying, um, and in individually, in their own episodes. Like I think it would be really great to circulate these kinds of reminders. Sometimes it's you can forget, or sometimes you get down, or yeah, there's a lot to get us down, and it's important, even when we've heard something, it's important to circulate it. We've heard it before, keep circulating it. We heard it 20 years ago. Ah, it's coming back around, you know? It never hurts to be reminded of something. Um, okay, well, I felt like I kind of meandered there, but I said what I said, and it came out how it came out. So, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let us know what fills you with awe and wonder in the comments. Please share the podcast with your friends. We're trying to reach more folks. See you next time. All right, listeners, if you can slash want to, please take your time listening to this episode. Make a cup of tea at home, find a cozy cafe, or listen on the go. Either way, I hope you find at least one thing in this episode that is interesting, sparks your curiosity, is helpful, or inspiring in some way. Until next time. Welcome to the podcast, Gabrielle. I'm so excited to have you here. Um, we just met, but your Instagram is magical, therefore, you're such a magical person. And I was gonna say this in the intro, but I already told you at the beginning how I came across your Instagram. Um, it's because I interviewed Lily, who we were talking about tide pools, and then all of a sudden I saw your Instagram, which is at Tide Pool Daydreams, and it's literally so magical. Um, you capture your tide pooling adventures in such a beautiful way, and I'd love to start off by asking you, how did you get into tide pooling?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Um, I'm glad that you feel the magic of the tide pools because that's what I feel when I'm out there. I feel like it's this magical world that truly when you walk out there, like it's kind of dark and like you just see a bunch of algae. You wouldn't know all the creatures that are there, but yeah, it's a magical world. I got into tide pooling. I wasn't around the ocean every day as a kid. I grew up in Michigan. But every year, my dad and I would go on these like camping trips to have some kind of ocean adventure. And we would go like beach combing or tide pooling or go see like the sea lions or something. But we actually went to visit Monterey, which California, where I live now. And we just spent hours and hours, lost track of time looking at the tide pools. Um, my dad grew up in Michigan too, but he had a couple years growing up in California. And so, growing up, he would tell me these stories about like finding anemones or like sea lion bones on the beach. And he's a scientist, so he definitely passed on his love of science and nature and like nerdy science things. So, yeah, it was a really special part of my childhood. And I always had this vision of like living in Monterey one day. And to get to be here now is really cool. And to get to be so close to the tide pools is like very special. And yeah, yeah.
I love that so much. Well, first of all, I realized and I didn't even ask you how you're doing, which that's always how I start. So I'm going to respond to this, but I still love to know how you're doing. First of all, that's amazing that you were exposed to tide pools at such a young age. And it's fascinating how much of our childhoods, you know, just influence us as we get older. um, and that's really cool that you got to share those moments with your dad. I love how you say you lost track of time exploring the tide pools. Um, Thank you for sharing that, because I was like, I like asking people about what life was like when they were kids. So thank you. I'm glad that happened because I was like, oh, I always ask about childhood, and it came up anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah. So I'm nitpicking, but I do care. Like, how are you?
Oh, I'm so good. Yeah. Today was a calm day and it's sunny. And when I first moved to California, I thought it'll be sunny every day. Not the case in Central California. So it is very nice to have the sun on me right now and out today. Um, yeah, no, I'm good.
Yeah, I can actually see the sunbeams on your face.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, I don't know too much about California, but I didn't know that Central California didn't get that much sunlight. So that's great. I'm glad we can do this when the sun is shining. Um, so I love to continue with your like I said, your Instagram um is so beautifully shared, your posts. And in one of them you say, at first a tide pool might just look like a puddle, but if you look a little closer, there's a whole rainbow world hidden between the tides. From bright nudie branches to elegant sea anemones, these tide pools are full of life and color, showing off the ocean's quiet beauty. And I just thought, like, wow. Can you say more about the quiet beauty of tide pools in the ocean?
Yeah, absolutely. You know that phrase like quiet beauty? I've been like playing with and getting to know, like have a better relationship with the word quiet in my recent life. I was very quiet growing up, like didn't talk much as a kid, and it took a long time to like kind of find my voice, and I'm still working on that, but um there's such a sense of peace when I'm in a tide pool. Usually I go alone, and it's kind of this meditative experience of just noticing and being close with these little creatures in nature and um, just really being amazed by every color and shape. And like, it's just there's so much biodiversity in the tide pools. Yeah, it's such a peaceful experience to get kind of out of my head and into the world in that tide pool. Um, yeah, and there are some sounds. There's like the scuttling of the crabs. You hear that a lot. It's one of my favorite sounds. And the gulls, they can be loud. But for the most part, it's just really this peaceful space. Yeah, it's one of my favorite kind of like meditative experiences.
Wow. I know I keep saying that's so beautiful. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that, but I really appreciate that because I've been thinking about peace a lot and like where do I find peace? Um and I like lavender tea. I find that I feel peace when I drink lavender tea and I recently spent a few months in New Mexico and it was lots of quiet and solitude. So yeah, I never would have thought, to find quiet in tide pools, quietness and peace. Um, and I love how you talk about the sounds there. It even on your Instagram, it's so sensory. The colors, the everything. Um, and so going off of that, I'd love to hear a few stories about your tide pooling experiences. If there are one or two stories that you remember.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things is going tide pooling with people who have never been before. um, or people who are new to it, or kids. It's so exciting to see them like get up close with these creatures, um, and fall in love with the ocean through like one little hermit crab who's super cute and they give it a name. I'm a nanny, and so I'm with two girls. They're 8 and 12, 9 and 12. I forgot she just had a birthday. Um, but it's so fun to go with them because they just like see the world with so much wonder, and like they usually name creatures they find like Timmy and Jimmy. That's like a trend for them right now. Um, but it's just so fun to see them connect with the ocean. I also have done some like teaching of summer camps, ocean summer camps, with youth and teenagers. And similarly, that's so special just to see them see animals they've never seen before. Um, and like as I said before, the diversity is crazy in a tide pool. And so even if you've been there before, you're going to see creatures you haven't seen. And um, yeah, it's just really cool to see people get so excited. Um, Another one, I recently found a sea slug I've been looking for like a year. It's a clown dorid, and
Wow.
it really has like bright orange spots. It looks like a clown. And so yeah, there's just this like amazing feeling when you find a new sea slug or a new creature. It's something else.
Wow. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I love that you get to experience the tide pools with kids. Like, there's something about like kids and like, yeah, that awe and wonder that's there. Last summer I got to see dolphins for the first time with kids, and
Oh,
they're they were like screaming and making dolphin sounds, and I don't know. I you saying that with the children you care for that reminded me of that memory and that sea slug. Gosh, I didn't even realize there's so many different sea slugs out there.
there's so many, and they're all different. Some are tiny, some are like 8 inches long. It's amazing.
Wow. Gosh, it what a I don't know. I was gonna say a palette of creativity. I don't know. How would you describe that sort of biodiversity?
It does feel so creative. It feels like kids drew like ideas for who would live in the ocean, and then you really find them. Yeah, creativity. I like that way to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like never ending, I don't know, never ending discoveries of creatures and um yeah, and on your Instagram, it's interesting how you connect different messages to different creatures you find in tide pools. Like, I was really kind of mesmerized by one post where you were connecting joy, the stretchiness of joy to an octopus, and you have another post about field notes from your heart where you were connecting messages to creatures. So, um, are there a few creatures or shells that you're really resonating with right now?
Yeah, I really love this specific sea slug called the opalescent nudibranch. And it kind of has this iridescent shimmer down its midline, and it's like bright red and colorful, has these like white tips on its back. I don't see them that often in the tide pools, but I recently went to the docks for the first time. Like on the side of docks, there are just hundreds and hundreds of animals, anemones, sea slugs. I didn't know they were there, but they're just hiding in plain sight, all these creatures. And yeah, there were dozens and dozens of these opalescent nudibranchs, and they are one of the first sea slugs I ever found. They're pretty special to me. So that's one I'm really resonating with. And always anemones. And there's something about them, the way that they open and close when you touch them. Um, I've been teaching yoga. I recently started ocean-inspired yoga classes on the beach.
Ooh.
So I try to incorporate like some of those messages, some of those field notes from the heart into it. Um, and there's this like doing heart-opening poses. I always think about the anemone and how when they're like feeling safe, they just are open and their tentacles are out. And then they close up and they're trying to protect themselves, like just like we do as people, like our posture will change. Um, and so I kind of think about them in those heart opening poses, and yeah,
Wow.
they're a fun image.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're so colorful. I think I'm just taking everything in because first, that the words are so interesting, like nudibranch, and then what's the name of the slug again? Omnipresent,
Yeah, opalescent. I know it's
opalescent.
strange. I think it comes from like opal because that's the color they
Mm.
have. It's like this blue shimmery kind of opally color, but I could be wrong. I
Wow.
don't know.
Wow, I love that. And yeah, I'm dying to see a sea anemone. They seem sort of friendly. I'm sure maybe that's my perception, but they seem really, open and friendly, like creatures that haven't really gone through any trauma or something. Just like,
Yeah.
hi. Maybe that's anthropomorph for I can't even say the word. Maybe that's what's happening, but I think there is something about sensing animals and plants. Is that your experience where you're sensing something about them?
Yeah, absolutely. I am big at the anthropomorphizing animals. I love to do
Me
that.
too. It's oh my gosh, I could say so much about that. I feel like people are sensing and we're using our imaginations and trying to relate.
Exactly. And that's what it is. We're trying to relate, even if it's not scientifically right. Like, it's a beautiful thing to want to relate to these creatures. And I think it's important to relate to them and feel empathy and compassion for these creatures. I think that's like so important for the world. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Oh my God. I feel like there is something in some part of me that's like healing because it can be really, I totally understand like how nature works where like animals have to eat other animals and things like that. But I think that the world really opens up when you know can, sense and use your imagination and yeah, as we said, try to relate. Well, I personally love abalone shells, and abalone are actually one of the symbols for the podcast. And I'd love to know what abalone means to you or what messages you connect to abalone.
I was so excited to see the abalone on your Spotify. And I also want to hear what it means to you. Abalone are like, to find one feels like such a gift from the ocean. You know, they are endangered, critically endangered, some species. And so I don't see the live ones all that often. When I do, it's like amazing. They have these like wonderful like black fringe on them, kind of, as like they're such interesting snails. I love the abalone. But then also their shells, like it's amazing to look. I mean, like I have one here. But to like look at every
Ooh,
single
wow,
layer
that's
and think
beautiful.
about it takes dozens and dozens of years, if not more. I don't really know how long, but I mean so many years to build up all those layers of that like iridescent mother of pearl, I think it's called. Um, it's just amazing to see it reach that full beauty. Yeah, so it feels like a rare gift to find them. And there's also, I mean, the indigenous people around here have had such a relationship with the abalone for so long. I feel like you can kind of like feel the sacredness of them. Um, I mean, just like that people have had a connection and relationship with them for so long and that continues. And I mean, I guess like yeah, reading about the stories about abalone, how they've been important to people, how beautiful they are. They're all different colors. Like there's just so much. They're such a cool species. Yeah. I love the abalone.
Yeah, they're so so beautiful. I would love to see live abalone. I am actually I've always been attracted to abalone. Like I'd see the shells on the internet, and then I bought an abalone shell at an herb shop um, in the Phoenix metro area. Um, and I asked where the shell came from, but the shop the shop owners or whoever was there didn't really know, but I suspect it came from the Pacific Ocean. And then later on last year, someone else was like, I love abalone. They looked at my shell and they were like, oh, well, this one looks like it's been farmed. So I didn't even know that abalone could be farmed too. So now I'm thinking about like wild abalone and then the farmed abalone. Um, but I don't know. They just, for me, it's just the feeling that they give. I don't know. I can't really describe it. But I noticed that you connected love to abalone, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I think there's something about them that they reflect so much light, they're so shimmery and um I just yeah, there's so many colors. They feel like an especially magical part of the tide pool, I think. It feels like finding this like piece of magic. I don't know. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You're just like, yeah. I've definitely had those experiences where I'm just like walking around at the beach or on a sandbar or something, and then coming across something, and I'm like, oh, you know.
Yes, I love that feeling that
Yes, I had that feeling when I was at this secret island, and there's this place called Jamaica Bay in Queens in New York City, and I went to this like secret island, and I've usually see horseshoe crabs that are dead on the beach. I at that point I'd never seen a horseshoe crab that was alive, so I finally got to see them alive and swimming in the water at that secret beach, and that was my sort of like moment, you know.
amazing. Oh, the horseshoe crab are so crazy how they haven't evolved in all their existence. They're just who they are, and it's they're perfect.
Millions of years later.
Crazy.
Gosh, wow, there is something about time coming up, I guess, with the shells and the horseshoe crabs and um uh yeah, time. Well, speaking of messages, are there I'm curious about the messages or lessons you've learned from the intertidal world in general. Uh, I noticed on Instagram you described as like an in-between place that is defined by change, transition, and uncertainty.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is that I am in a phase of transition and change and uncertainty, like so many people in their mid-20s. And there's something kind of comforting about like seeing that reflected in nature and like finding patterns that connect with you in the natural world. Um, yeah, it is always changing. Every time I go to the tide pool, it's different. I've never seen the same thing twice. Even if I find the same creature, it looks slightly different. It has a different hue, a different color, a different size. So, yeah, there's something really cool about the uncertainty that you show up to the tide pool with. And that is like an opening to being curious and finding things you wouldn't expect, being surprised. Like, you really can't be surprised if you think that you know what you're going to see, if you feel so certain about what's going to happen. And so I've been learning that in my life, and to kind of like reenact that within the context of tide pooling helps. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think there's something really cool about the unknown and the opportunities within it, even though it's so uncomfortable. And yeah, the tide pool helps me remember.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh. Well, I needed to hear that because I'm definitely in the same space of like unknown and uncertainty. And yeah, it's such a great reminder that like surprises and magic can be in all of that. Because I realize, gosh, sometimes I don't think I'm the most optimistic person. I'm just realizing that now, like over the last month or so, I'm like, oh, being a little bit pessimistic, but yeah, thinking about the tide pools, I love how you're saying it's like an opening of some sort, and yeah, I'm just sort of processing that and yeah, I think it's an interesting way to kind of process being in that uncertainty is like to go tide pooling.
Yeah, or even if you're not like by the ocean, like go in the woods. What do you find within the lichen? What does the tree bark look like? Like, is there like a bright green moss over here, or like a bird you haven't seen before? I think that's always been kind of my practice when I'm feeling anxious or lonely or uncertain. It's like one of the few things that really helps me with that. Um, yeah, yeah.
Wow, I love that. I need to maybe find some place here in the, the desert here while I'm here. Um, I do find that I do well. I won't complete that thought because it's not really thought out. But so, yeah, I'm like, hmm. But what about the ocean overall, especially living near the Pacific Ocean, leaves you in awe and wonder?
Oh, well, so I'm very lucky to live in a marine sanctuary, really. That's what the
Ooh.
Monterey
Oh,
Bay
I
is.
love that.
Yeah, the word sanctuary is like a really wonderful way that they've described it. And to think about it, it is a sanctuary for people, not just the creatures, but it's a protected area. It has been for decades now. And so there's actually a really beautiful story of the Monterey Bay. It was overfished. There was a cannery here. The animals were not thriving, the landscape was in trouble. And after it became a sanctuary, the creatures started to come back. The sardines started to repopulate, and now we have like hundreds of sea lions literally on the beach. They had to close one of our beaches because there's too many sea lions.
Mm.
But oh, it's just the biodiversity is incredible here. You can see harbor seals and eels, and of course, I'm obsessed with the sea slugs, so the sea slugs. But there's just such a variety of life. It's unlike anything else that I've experienced. Yeah, the diversity, and it's amazing just to see so many different creatures in one tide pool as well. Like this tiny space, you might have like a foot area and you could find like dozens of creatures. It's you have to slow down to see them is the thing though, because you can kind of walk past them and not notice, but if you really slow down, you'll see more and more creatures appear over time, and you get kind of more practice at finding them. Sometimes they're super tiny, but yeah, they are so inspiring to me.
That's amazing. Ah, I love that. A marine sanctuary.
Mhm.
Gosh. And yeah, slowing down to connect to that awe and wonder. Yeah, because it's sort of like if it's like go, 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 you might not be able to see that slug, that one slug, or the octopus that's, I don't know, blending into the rock or something.
Exactly, and they do blend in. Yeah, you just sometimes they're right there and you don't notice. Hmm.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I feel that way. I mean, generally I slow down when I'm not in New York City. I slow down a lot, and it is interesting where I've lived and been, how the pace of life is, and it is, I honestly think there's more time in Arizona. I like
Yeah,
I think that there's literally more time in, like, in this region. I have no idea, but life is so slow, and anyway,
it's so interesting. Yeah, different places have like different feelings of time. It's crazy. Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, I just, even my sister and my niece just got back from a trip to New York, and even when they got back, they were like, "Gosh, there's so much time here, you know? It's
Um,
so different." Well, speaking of awe and wonder, are there other things in your life that you get that sense of?
yeah, yeah. Mostly nature things. I love going to Big Sur. Have you ever been there?
No, but I would love to get there.
You would love it. It's one of those places where time really, really slows down. I lived there for a while when I first moved here, and I fell in love with the Stellar's jay. They're like this blue jay. I don't know if they're in Arizona, but they have a mohawk. They do
Wow.
like a little, and they're bright blue. They're so vibrant, and I would just spend like my lunch break always when I was working there like sitting in this little table in the woods, and these birds would like come down and they'd try to steal crumbs. They're kind of mischievous, but they are so beautiful. They're so bright. And now, whenever I see them, it feels like this like synchronicity. And it's just like I see the bird and I feel like the universe is telling me like I'm where I need to be. It's so fun to see them, and I only see them sometimes, not as much as I did in Big Sur, because I really like the forest, but they give me so much wonder. Like, so does like all these synchronicities in nature. Like, maybe I'll think about a certain sea slug in the morning, and then I'll go tide pooling and see it. And those moments are like so special to me. And, you know, they don't happen all the time, but when they do, it feels like so reassuring, I guess. Yeah.
Wow. More and more I keep hearing about people talk about synchronicities and messages that comes from, like, I don't know, like whales or birds or just animals overall, like just how that happens. It's very interesting, and I don't know, it does make me think of, like, being connected to Earth in a way, because I don't know, it kind of makes me think of, like, isolation, that, like, we're not isolated, that we can receive messages or synchronicities from other creatures.
Mm,
Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
because the submersion I was in a submersion with Michaela Harrison, who we were talking about earlier, and someone in the submersion was like, thank you for reminding us to like not downplay those messages, to like really take them seriously, you know? Um, I know that just what you said reminded me about that.
I love that. Yeah, they really do feel like messages and they have so much meaning like when you let them. Yeah, yeah. I feel very much so. Like I lived in Maine in college for a while and I had met the most beautiful people there and so much about it was wonderful. But the winter is can be very isolating. I'm sure you've experienced winters in New York, so you know how winter
Mhm.
changes
Yeah.
things. But it was like very, I lived on like a tiny island in Maine for college, and I just remember these cardinals would like swoop by, and it was kind of the same thing, one of those synchronicities. And it just felt like this message of like, yes, you're on this island with so few people, and nothing is open. Everything is very calm and cold, and you're not alone. Like these birds are here, these animals are around you. Like there's this whole ecology that you're part of, and there's something so like comforting about that when you do feel isolated to have this like to kind of treat the plants and the animals as company. Like they can be company if you want them to be. Um, so yeah, yeah.
Wow. Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm this is like such a spontaneous question, but I'm so curious to hear more about living in Maine because I visited Maine twice in rural areas. And first of all, Maine has like a whole culture. Like I know that sounds really weird to say, but like there was when I was there, there was like a film festival that was celebrating like Maine culture. Um, and I think there's even like an accent or something. I don't know, but I
It's
was like, wow, I was just like, wow. And you lived on an island. I'm just curious, like, being there and then in California, how was it in that environment?
yeah, yeah, it was there was something really cool about being on the island. Like everybody knew everybody. It was very like close knit. I was in a very specific type of like Maine culture because my school was so international. People were from all over the world, even though it was a small school. And so I kind of got a different like experience of Maine than your typical Maine experience. But I mean, like my best friend lives in Maine and grew up in Maine, and her family has the accent. It's wonderful. And yeah, it's different and it's such a specific culture and I love it in ways. Um, how is it different than California? It's funny because the town that I'm in is kind of similar to that town in that it is kind of small. A lot of retirees come here. Um, and they're both like so nature focused. Like everything is about the earth here and there, like the ocean. There's lots of fisheries in Maine, fisheries here. There's a lot of overlap, and I think those pieces are what I like. That connection to nature is so strong. I think it draws me. That's what draws me to both places. Yeah.
Mm. Oh, I love that. Wow, because I've always been interested in small town living and living rurally because I grew up in the city and I always just wondered what it'd be like to, I don't know, just grow up in a small town. Um, I don't know. There's something that there's just anyway. I that's a whole thing. But thank you for sharing that because I do think the more that I've been to different places in the country, I'm like, wow, the country is so vast. Like Maine is obviously so different from like Florida and from New Mexico. Like the landscape changes are so different. So it's cool that you got to experience like the ecology of Maine and, now you're in a different place on the West Coast. Um, well, I'd love to pivot um a little bit. I noticed that you merge marine ecology with mindfulness, and that's what really drew me because I love all the tide pooling people that I follow, but it was really interesting to see, this combination that you're sharing. And so, what gave you the idea to merge tide pooling with mindfulness?
Yeah, a lot of it is just my own practice. Um, my therapist has this homework for me where I'm supposed to go out and look for glimmers, these like micro moments of connection in the world. And it's a way to like retrain your brain to see more of the good. And I think the place I like to do that the most is in nature. And it just felt like such a natural like merging of these two things. Like I'm super interested in mindfulness from like a yoga perspective too. And as a spiritual practice, for me, tide pooling is like very spiritual. And and by spiritual, I mean like an act of presence of finding a place of calm and presence and getting out of the mind and into the world. And tide pooling just, it's such a sensory experience, I think, too. And I'm kind of like a very sensory seeking person. And it just grounds me, you know? Like there's that exercise to look for like, I'm not gonna get it right, but it's like maybe five things you see, four things you hear, three things you can touch as like a grounding exercise. And tide pooling kind of naturally is that. And so as I've like worked on weaving mindfulness into my own day to day, it really just felt like it is so much easier to do that in a tide pool than meditating, which I also do, but is hard. And tide pooling feels like kind of like a walking meditation or like a engaged meditation, not only because, you're there to like connect with the earth, but also because you truly have to be present like for your safety. Like it's kind of slippery and you have to be watching the waves and you have to make sure you have your footing and you're not stepping on an anemone. And so kind of like in a emotional, spiritual way, but also in like a practical way, it requires presence. And I think I'm always like looking for more presence because I'm someone I live in my mind a lot, like many people, and I'm always kind of like ruminating, and to be able to get like to this place of presence is hard, and tide pooling is one of my easier routes to it, I think. Yeah.
Gosh, thank you for sharing that because I resonated with that so much. Like, I love that you and your therapist are working on and I like how you use the word retraining your brain to look for the good in the world because literally there's so much going on right now as we're doing this in the world, and the news hardly ever shares any good things. And so it's like for many people, we're constantly exposed to what's wrong and what's in violence. Like we're constantly exposed to what doesn't feel good. So I love that. I think that's so vital to intentionally find the good in the world, the beauty, the magic, and the small moments of joy. And I love how you say how presence is spiritual because I never thought of it that way. I've thought of presence as it's something that I practice, but I never thought of it as spiritual. Um and it really clicked for me when you were like, you have to be present because it's slippery and also you don't want to step on an anemone. Like that just clicked for me. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Um what you said something else, but I can't. Oh, and living in your head, like I keep having recurring thoughts about something, and literally yesterday, I keep saying literally, but yesterday I counted that I had this same thought like 25 times. I'm just minding my business, walking, just minding my business yesterday, and 25 plus times the same or similar thought kept coming into my mind, and I'm like, what is going on here? So there is something about knowing that we're existing here, like in our mind, but we can't always like, I don't know, what would you say? Like we can't always be in here, or like what would you say?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, I totally relate. I'll be thinking all these thoughts over and over again. I'll have like remembering embarrassing moments from third grade. Why? That doesn't help to just come up. And yeah, I think that like a big part of my like work these days is to get out of my head and like into my body to like, you know, live in a more whole way instead of just like being fragmented between like living here and like moving. But um yeah, I think it's like this getting back into like a full experience of the body um is so helpful and difficult. But
Mhm.
yeah.
I hear that. Yeah. Yeah, I love that it's so great to know this, and then also acknowledging it's not always easy, and that's probably true for a lot of people. Um and but I think just knowing and trying like the best we can, and I love that tide pulling is one way that you're able to find a presence. Um well, I have to I'm coming to my notes. Um well, I'm this might be a repeating question, but um I'm just curious about your thoughts on the ocean's role in, the collective's well-being, because I remember one time some news article that I won't be able to like source, maybe I can find it somewhere online, where it was talking about how the politicians there were trying to get their constituents to understand, even though they lived inland, because it was actually a state in the Midwest, even though they lived inland, they were still connected to the ocean. And that always stuck with me. And so it's like we're all connected to the ocean. So, what are your thoughts on how our well-being is connected to the ocean?
Yeah, that's so true. You know, on kind of a practical level, all the rivers are going to eventually end up at the ocean. All these bodies of waters are connected, and we learn about the five oceans or in school, but there's really one ocean. They're all connected. There's no like line here that says Pacific and Atlantic. It's one ocean and things travel, creatures travel, they migrate. And I think it's a reciprocal relationship between humans and the ocean, even through like our breath. It's like half of the breaths we take, every other breath comes from the ocean, the marine phytoplankton, the kelp, the seaweeds. And, the other half comes from the trees, of course. But no matter where you are, even something as simple as your breath every day relies on the ocean. Um, it's really amazing how our bodies are so connected to the ocean, even if we don't think about it all the time, no matter where you are. I grew up in Michigan and fell in love with the ocean while in Michigan, um, as do many people. And, we have the lakes, and the lakes go out into the ocean. We have like the St. Lawrence Seaway, really not that far away. Um, I think we're all a lot more connected to the ocean than we always remember. Um, yeah, and I think that our health relies on the health of the ocean. And, we have plastics, we have all these issues, ocean issues, and they affect us, our human health as well, and the health of the other creatures on the planet. So, yeah, we're so reliant on the ocean for food also. Um, and psychologically, there's that wonderful, the blue mind effect of how like being by the water is so good for the brain. And there's just so much we get from the beauty of the ocean. People are inspired and, draw creativity from it. I think, yeah, we are so connected to water, and it's wonderful to remember that.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a great reminder for me. Um, I I don't know, there's a weird part of me that so stubborn. Like because I'm not near the ocean, I feel like I have to be right near the ocean to be connected to the ocean, but that doesn't always have to be the case. And for some reason, I can't accept that. There's just this huge part of me that's like, no, I must be near the ocean to be connected to the ocean. But I keep hearing this that it's like, like just like you're saying, being near the river and wetlands, you're connected to the ocean because they flow into the ocean. I love that practical stance too, that practical, physical, remembrance of knowing how everything is connected. Um, okay, let me come back here. Um, well, on your website, you you say that you have a background. Oh wait, let me backtrack. Let me backtrack. So if someone wants to go tide pooling and they are completely new to it, what would you tell them?
Oh my goodness, that is so exciting. First of all, I would say you're in for a treat. Um, I would say wear shoes that have good traction. You don't want to be slipping around. And I would say go so slowly, like slower than you want to go, slower than you think you have to go, because a lot of the times there are creatures that are right in front of you and you can't see them. And I've really come to learn this from, I have a new tide pooling friend from Instagram. And her name's Molly. She has a wonderful TikTok, Molly Fishman, and it's like marine education. Anyway, I'll go with her and I'll be looking at this tide pool and I won't see anything, and she sees like three or four sea slugs. And it's,
Wow.
it's a practice, to get good at like seeing them and realizing what they are, but go slow, I would say. I would say important to go at low tide. I probably should have said that first. There's the NOAA app, NOAA tide charts. I use an app, it's called Tide Alert. That is my favorite. It's kind of cute. It shows like this little fish that goes up and down. It shows you at what point you are in the tide cycle that day. Um, Negative tides are really, really good. You want like 0 to negative, and I would also say there's an app called Seek, the iNaturalist app, and it will tell you the different creatures that live in your area. So if you look at that before you go tide pooling, there'll be little points and it tells you like somebody saw this nudibranch here, somebody saw a crab here. Like it tells you, and that's true no matter where you are in the world. The iNaturalist app can tell you the plants that are near you that people have identified, the animals. It's a pretty cool resource, and it's my favorite to kind of get to know the creatures who live there. Um, I would say be gentle with the creatures there. Walk carefully because there's so much life that sometimes you don't even notice is there, like little anemones on the rock. You want to make sure you're cautious about them. But yeah, just go slow, be careful, look closely, and enjoy.
Wow. I love that. Well, you heard it. You heard it, folks. If you go tide pooling, Gabrielle has given some really great tips. I'm definitely going to remember this when I go tide pooling. Um, Especially when I, get to California. Go
Yeah.
slow. Gosh, go slow. And I noticed on your website, you say you have a background in human ecology and experiential education with a few semesters of divinity school. And for some reason, I missed that part. I was like, divinity school. I think I'm interested in this because both my grandparents went to divinity school and they were pastors. So if you're comfortable, I'm just so curious, like, what was it like going to divinity school or having semesters of divinity school?
Yeah, that's cool to hear. They were pastors. I came to California partially because of this program called Blue Theology, and it is experiential ocean education for youth, and teenagers and also adults sometimes. And I started working with them to like kind of help with the marine biology education, and their whole mission is to help youth connect with the ocean, develop a heart connection with the ocean. And from that connection, you grow to love the ocean. And of course, what we love, we protect, we take care of. And so it's this kind of conservation approach that is less about science. Science is wonderful, but more about just experiences, just like spending time with the ocean. We would have like mindful, contemplative experiences where the youth would like sit at the sea and write about how they experience God in that moment or their understanding of the divine in that moment. Um,
Wow.
and that like completely changed so much of my um, experience of how I view education. Like it doesn't just have to be in a lab looking at, you know, algae, as fun as that is. It can also just be sitting by the sea, um, and developing a relationship with the sea. And I think that's what it's all about. Um, but kind of a tangent there, but it wraps around because that denomination, this like progressive, ocean loving, conservation driven church, they really like took me in and helped me apply to divinity school. I was
Wow.
imagining that I would kind of grow this ocean ministry. Um, and it was a really beautiful time. I met some incredible people doing beautiful work. Like they're based in Berkeley. I went to the Pacific School of Religion for a couple semesters, and
Wow.
um, people are doing wonderful, like ecological ministries where they're, um, not all ocean-based. Some are more like eco conservation, but beautiful, beautiful time. I ended up pausing that for a bunch of reasons. Nothing was wrong, but I kind of found that I was less motivated to give sermons about that connect to the Bible and more kind of driven by like poetry and experiences with the earth. A lot of Mary Oliver. And
Mhm.
all of the pastors that I connected with through that time were very supportive of my love of Mary Oliver. And so I I don't know, I found that maybe ministry wasn't the way for me, but it definitely gave me so much and changed me, and I have so much gratitude for that time. But yeah, I think divinity school was really special, and I might go back again in, 10 years, but now isn't the time. But yeah, it was a cool time.
Wow. Gosh. I remember my grandma went to divinity school in Denver, and because I was raised by my grandmother, and I remember there must have been a college campus because we were living like near the divinity school, and I had that memory while you were speaking, and I was just like, I think she would be really surprised or interested in your blue theology because I think maybe for her generation, I don't I don't know. And for her generation, maybe I don't know, but I'm thinking like that kind of approach or that overall theme of connecting ministry with the ocean, I don't think that was ever available or so it's just interesting to see like what is out there as far as divinity school and um I don't know. It just it just makes me go in all sorts of directions because I think water has a role in the Bible. I should know this. I was raised super religious.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yes.
it does.
Yeah, there's so much scripture about water. And we would integrate that a lot into the program. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just like, yeah, there's definitely something with yeah, water in the Bible, water and Jesus, um and I'm sure in other faiths also,
Mhm.
water in the ocean shows up, you know? So it's just interesting, um, that connection. Um, do you think has your time in divinity school shaped your mindfulness practice? I think you said it already, but I'd love to know like how?
Yeah, it so has. One of the things this I feel like I learned so much from the youth and the teenagers who would come to this because so much of it was wanting them to share their experiences. It was really important to me not to like force any theology on them or tell them who God is because I believe that it can be different for everybody. That is a relationship that is personal, and some people choose not to have it, some people don't. All wonderful. And I just really wanted to give that to the students and give them that kind of space. And hearing about their reflections of like, where do you see God in the ocean? How do you experience God in the ocean? It was just really beautiful. And, they would say things like, about connection, about feeling safe, about, um, there's these wonderful, wacky creatures in the ocean, and they all look so different, and they all are so vibrant and interesting in themselves. They're so unique. And to see like teenagers who view these creatures and come away with this thought that God or the universe designed them to be exactly who they should be, no matter what anybody says. And to kind of have that inspiration from a sea slug is so beautiful and sacred. And it's like I'm so amazed by these students and what they come up with and what it means to them. And I totally relate. Like I feel like, they say like you walk in the woods and the trees are tall and it helps you to stand up a little bit taller, or you see an interesting creature and it's so lovable even though it's so funny looking, and you feel like, oh, like it isn't about how you look, it's about presence. I just all these things. And it's just
Mhm.
really inspired me and continues to inspire me um, to have this like place where you see people connect with the earth and it changes them um, is just like the most beautiful thing to me. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I just yeah, I think it really translates through what you're sharing, and I think that's why I was so drawn to what you're sharing because um yeah, I do find that I like sailing. I do find that like I feel sailing is a way to connect with, God. Um and just being out on the water, it feels very spiritual, but like going back to what you're saying, there's also that part of like being present so you stay alive and you're paying attention to the wind, it's both of that like out there, but it's also very grounded, like it's both, um
That you have that experience with sailing. How cool.
yeah, that's why it's really hard not to be sailing right now, but I'm sure I'll get back to it.
Yeah.
um
Oh.
Yeah, and as hard as it's been for me to accept, I also realize that God is in the desert here too,
Mhm.
and very much so. And I know this is a home for people who have deep roots here in the like desert lands. And so it's interesting where you see or encounter, God or source or however people want to define that for themselves, and maybe for other people, the a plant is just a plant, and that's totally fine, you know. So finally, I didn't think we'd get to the last question so fast, but finally, I also noticed that you read the poetry of Mary Oliver, and I love Mary Oliver as well. And actually, anyway, I don't have to go. I'm not gonna go say that, but I was gonna like relive an embarrassing moment where I shared Mary Oliver, and people weren't as enthusiastic as I was.
Oh no.
I know it's like you want to spread Mary Oliver, everyone doesn't feel the same. Okay, but
Yeah.
I'm curious, what moves you about Mary Oliver?
Yeah, I'm glad you love her too. Oh my goodness, she has been so like important to me in my life. Um, I first read Mary Oliver in my high school poetry class, and high school was hard, as it is for so many. I felt very isolated and confused and all these things that, teenagers feel. And I found this Mary Oliver book. And it's like actually hard to believe there was a time when I didn't know Mary Oliver, but I found this book and I was just immediately hooked. Like every page, I just felt so like seen and understood and yeah, Mary Oliver has become like scripture to me. I really feel that in her words that there is so much love and she was somebody who had so much going on in her life and her you know where she felt safe and regulated and found all these amazing connections that became poetry was in nature and I guess I relate to that, and her words just like bring me back to that feeling immediately of like finding an amazing animal or feeling really safe in a forest or like, being by a river. And she just describes things that I felt, but I didn't have the words for. And I just love that experience in poetry where you read something and you think, oh, like, I wish I could say that. I wish I'm so glad she wrote it down. I'm so glad it's here. Um, yeah, she is so inspiring to me in so many ways. My best friend in Maine gave me this book, The Devotions by Mary Oliver, and
Wow,
she like wrote a little note in it, and that made it extra special to have like that connection with her. And yeah, I just love Mary Oliver.
that's beautiful. Yes, it's amazing how much she captures in like a few sentences, you
Yeah.
know? It's it'd be like four sentences and I'm just like, you know, just heart wide blown wide open.
Yeah.
Um it's amazing. And it's there are certain people I feel like in my who have passed away who still seem so alive. Like I feel that with like Frida Kahlo and with Mary Oliver, like people who are gone now, physically, but something about what they have left behind is still so like palpable.
Yeah,
Um
that's so well said. It really is. Yeah. You can
is
feel her spirit in it. Yeah.
yes. Is there a particular poem, maybe that never gets old?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. There's the Wild Goose poem, there's Peonies I really love. Um my goodness, there's When I Am Among the Trees, where she talks about, she says, I would almost say that the trees and the willows and the beach, I would almost say that they save me and daily. And I just love that. These little moments of connection in nature do feel like being saved. They do feel like this like comfort. Um, Yeah. Do you have one that
Wow.
you love that never gets old?
Well, I I feel like my life for the last 7 years has been shocking. If I use a really sensationalized word, it's been shocking in a lot of different ways. But I'd also say astonishing. And I like how in her poems sometimes I realized that it was just an excerpt that I kept holding on to, but that it's within a larger poem. But it's the excerpt. It says instructions for living a life. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. And
Mm.
but it's in this larger. this larger poem. Like at the end, death waits for me. I know it around one corner or another. This doesn't amuse me, neither does it frighten me. And then she goes on to say, after the rain, I went back into the fields of sunflowers. It was cool and I was anything but drowsy. I walked slowly and listened to the crazy roots in the drenched earth laughing and growing. And anyway, I I'm feeling astonished lately by lots of things, and it's a very interesting feeling.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I don't know just what an interesting soul, just
Yeah. Sh-
interesting person.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. The pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. So powerful. So simple. Like you say, so few words, so much said. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like that astonishment could be being in the tide pool, or it could be, I just talked to an astrologer named Camille, and she talked about how what it sounded like to me like a lot of internal she described it as internal shocks, but maybe it could also be internal astonishment. I don't know if she used that word. So it's just like astonishment is everywhere. And someone just, this person named Sienna, who's just an amazing writer, shared a quote about love with me. And I was astonished by that. So I'm just like, so much astonishment. I might need a break. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, shout out to Mary Oliver. I'm so curious, like if you had a chance to say anything to her, what would you say?
Oh my goodness. That is such a good question. I would just tell her thank you for all this beautiful writing that has in ways saved me and continues to. Yeah. Mhm.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So much love for Mary Oliver.
Oh, we love her.
Well, I feel so grateful to be able to speak with people on this podcast. It really is connecting me to such interesting people, um, and really helps me get out of my mind and connect with folks. And I just want to say thank you so much for meeting me at the Through Line, Gabrielle. Do you have any other thoughts on your heart you would like to share?
Just thank you so much. This has been great. You have such a way with words, the way that you phrase things, and I loved connecting with you today. Yeah. Thank you, Simone.
Thank you.